Hello and welcome along to the Property Academy podcast by Opus Partners. I'm your host, Steve McKnight.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
And today on the show, we're talking about I bought a house through TradeMe and it didn't really work out for me. So over the next 15 minutes, you're going to learn the deals that Andrew and I sometimes shake my head at, how to tell the difference between a bargain investment and a baddie investment, and what to do instead of spending a lot of hours scrolling through TradeMe. And one of the wonderful things about running this podcast, Andrew, is we often get people emails saying, "Thank you so much for doing the podcast. I've learned so much and I've just bought this house." And that makes you feel so good that people are not only listening to the show or watching the show, but also doing something with that information. But sometimes, just sometimes, I look at what the people have bought and I think, oh, I personally wouldn't have bought that one. And so I want to talk about how to tell the difference between two. But we should call out some of our own biases first.
Yeah, Ed and I own Opus Partners. We help people buy new build investment properties. And as a result, there's an obvious bias that we're going to say, hey, don't use TradeMe to buy a property. Come and see us, because if you buy through us, then we're going to be able to help you out. And so we'd rather that. But today we're going to focus on the data, because at the end of the day, Ed and I don't actually care. So long as the country is being better investors, we get enough of the people that want to actually work with us. So that bias is kind of offset by the fact that actually, let's just use some data.
Yeah, cool. And so we'll focus on the numbers rather than opinion. And I suppose the other thing just to call out is that none of the properties that we help investors buy are on TradeMe, because we only do off-market deals, right? So one other thing is that obviously we only focus on new builds, but there are a lot of people who send us an email and say, hey, I bought this existing property, I'm about to flip it or I'm going to renovate it. And those aren't those times where I kind of shake my head as much, because if you are renovating and you're doing a really good job out of it, you can make some serious money. It's often the people who are following more of a just buy and hold strategy and maybe I'm taking all of the lessons from the podcast. So give us an example of what we mean by that.
So here's a property in Rolleston that one of the investors that emailed in had purchased. And looking through the photos, this is a really, really nice house. It's a new build. It is probably, I would say, more owner-occupier spec than it is investor spec.
What's making you say that?
Well, that kitchen fit out looks pretty bougie. Certainly the splashback, the bench.
Is that a marble splashback there?
Which I think is probably a bit more than I would normally spend on a rental property. That floor, the floor that we're looking at, is looks like it's actual wood planks rather than just a laminate. I could be wrong, but it's got the feel that this is probably a little bit of a spec that you would prefer if it was an owner occupier. Now you might think, well, that's great, it's going to appeal to all these people, which is true. But not every property that can be rented out is a good investment. It might be a fine rental, but it's not necessarily as good an investment as it could be.
Yeah, a couple of other things I'm picking out. The golden tapware. It's absolutely beautiful, but that's also going to get trashed by tenants. So often you want something a little bit more harder wearing, because you as the landlord assume all of the maintenance costs. So I love stainless steel when it comes to tapware and things like that, because it's going to be easy to clean, easy to replace. If you go for something a bit higher end that looks very nice, then it can be quite costly to replace. That's just one thing I'm pulling out.
And this could be the photography, but it looks pretty big. Do you have the size of the house?
I believe it's about 190 square meters for a 3-bedroom.
For a 3-bedroom?
Yeah.
That's very big.
Yeah, very big. Now, why is that an issue?
Well, I mean, you're only going to get a certain amount of rent for a 3-bedroom house. Whilst a 190 square meter property might get, say, an extra $20 a week, a 4-bedroom that's smaller is likely to get more rent because it appeals to more people.
Yeah, when we look at the surveys of tenants and what they really care about, there are 3 main things, right? Number one, they care about the location. Is it in a place that's close to work and all of those kinds of things? And this property is in Rolleston. It's an area that I really like as an investment. So I think you could tick it off from location. The second thing they look at is the rent. Tenants want something that's affordable. Now, is this going to be an affordable property? Well, it's probably not from a rental perspective. And what I mean by that is because it's a bit more owner-occupier, because it's a bit bougier, it's not like you can really jack up the rent. And then the third thing, and this is the one that I really want to hammer home, the third thing that tenants care most about is the number of bedrooms. Because if you have a family, as long as it's in the right location, and as long as it's in an area that you can afford or a property you can afford, the next thing you really care about
Can we house our family?
Do I have space for all of the kids or for all of the family members that I need to have within this house? And so that's where I go, oh, it's a very large 3-bedroom house. You could even have a smaller 4-bedroom property and it might actually get more rent or be more affordable.
One other thing that I'm noticing here, just down the side of the house, you can see there's some nice plantings down there. Now, one thing I will tell you about landscaping when it comes to tenants is you will get some tenants that are really good and look after your garden, but that would probably be 10% at most. Most tenants are just going to let those plants die. That's just the reality of it. I've had so many properties where we've upspec'd the landscaping, or one of the tenants has upspec'd the landscaping, then they move out, the next tenants kill it. It's just one of those things. Not many people have a green thumb. You might have a green thumb, I think, over time. Now that you're nesting, I can see you out there with your pruning shears or something like that. I employ a gardener because the last thing I want to do is garden. If I were renting a property, or back when I rented properties, I would basically have a deck. That was it.
Do you know what? I do have hedge trimmers now. I've got
you
those.
do.
What are they? I'm doing this with my hands.
Secateurs?
No, I think a secateur is like just one
I
of those
don't know.
pruning
Why are
things.
you asking
What
me?
are these things where you hedge?
Shears.
Those shears. Anyway, I've been getting that because right under my
Oh,
office
you're
window.
becoming such a little homebody now, aren't you?
No, I'm not, because I did it one time and then I was out there trimming them with my shears, and then I thought, oh, we should get a gardener to do this. I'm not that sort of person. One other thing that I'm just picking up though, and this is really important, if you are scrolling through TradeMe looking at new builds, this is a must, because there are often big hidden costs. And the big hidden costs, where, as I'm looking through the photos here, is that there are no curtains, there are no blinds, there are no window coverings. So often when you buy a new build property, you're going to find that there are no curtains, there are no blinds. There may not even be, this one looks like it does have a dishwasher, but sometimes some appliances aren't included. Sometimes even heat pumps haven't been
I haven't
included.
seen a heat pump in there yet.
It looks like there might be some actually in the ceiling.
Yeah.
But the thing that's really important about this is twofold. Sometimes things like curtains can cost about 10 grand to put in.
Yeah, the other thing is here, if that's a central heating, I don't know if that's going to pass Healthy Homes, because the heating standard is so high, it's absurd. But there's like, this is perfectly fine. That's what we've got at home at our house. But I'm sure that our house wouldn't pass Healthy Homes for a tenant.
Yeah, one little thing here as well that's quite interesting is that there is no door between the lounge and the hallway, which means that for Healthy Homes, the entire hallway is counted within the heating standard, which means that your heat pump has to be able to heat not just the lounge and the kitchen dining area, but also this entire hallway as well.
So you're probably up-speccing this by putting 2 heat pumps in there, plus your curtains and blinds. And again, because it's a nice house with lots of windows, you're probably 20 grand with all of those, maybe 15 to 20 grand.
The main thing we're just trying to get across is that when you do look through even like newer properties on TradeMe, it's important to just understand where there are those hidden costs. The price on this, I think, ended up being 800 grand. And I just thought, oh, for a 3-bedroom property in that area, I would love to live in this property. It's a great property, but it's much more going to be more of an owner-occupier than a rental property.
It's probably a fair price for a 190 square metre house, but I wouldn't be spending 800 grand on a 3-bedroom house.
Well, I suppose the big question there as well, how do you figure out what's fair value and how do you actually decide what's going to be the best investment? So one thing that we released for many, many years was our return on investment spreadsheet. This was downloaded by like 16,000 property investors. But a number of people said to me, Ed, to be honest, I don't really get what this spreadsheet means. And so we ended up ditching that and we built our own online platform. It's called Opus Plus and it's completely free to use, will always be free to use. But you can go in here and upload those properties that you are looking at on TradeMe or realestate.co.nz or anywhere else and actually look at the numbers. So I've blanked out the address and just given it an example, but this is the 3-bedroom property that's 799 grand and you know what it rents for and all those kinds of things. I've also got a comparable property because you'd probably be able to spend about 30 grand less and get probably a smaller house in terms of floor area, but more bedrooms and higher yield. And once you load the properties in, there's really only two numbers that I care about. The first is the return on investment, which basically says if we think about the property going up in value, if we think about the rental return for the property, if we think about all of the different ways you could make money through property, let's sum it all up into one number. And so this more expensive property that we've been talking about today has a return on investment of about 258%. That's forecast over the next 15 years. If I look at a cheaper property that rents for a wee bit more, and we're calling it the 4-bed property, probably has a return on investment about 312% is my kind of best estimate around this. And so you'd say from a cold or hard-nosed investment perspective, the smaller property with more bedrooms is probably a better fit than this other one that we've been talking about that's more suited for the owner-occupier.
Do you know the thing that I tend to look at? Because the way I think about using usable equity as my deposit, if I'm using the no cash needed method like most investors, and that's what I do a lot of the time, I put a little bit of cash, use a little bit of equity. I look at, okay, what's my contribution? So over the next 15 years for the more bougie property that I might feel more related to because I think, oh yeah, it's a nice house, I could see myself living there. It's going to cost me 125 grand. The cheaper property that is, more bedrooms, but smaller section, smaller house, it's about half of that. It's about 76 grand or 77 grand. So I kind of think, okay, I could buy two of those for the price of one of the others, give or take. And okay, well, that means that I get twice as much out. I mean, not only that, there's a higher return on investment. So even if I got the same amount of return for both of them, well, if I could get two rather than one for the same amount of cash flow, it feels like a bit of a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, we haven't even factored in those kind of hidden costs as well into these numbers. And look, I'm not trying to be mean about this specific investor, right? Because I think it's wonderful if people listen to the show and they go out and they invest and they improve their financial life by investing. I think that's really, really good. But what I also want to get across is sometimes I hear from listeners who say, "Oh, Ed, I've really listened to you. I'm buying new builds and I'm specifically investing in areas that you like." And then I'm like, "Oh, but you've missed quite a lot of other things that we talk about on the show as well. It's not just about buy a new build in Rolleston or buy a new build in the specific area in Auckland or those things. There's a couple more steps as well that I just want to make sure that you're listening to or getting the takeaways from the whole podcast, not just one or two things. Now, again, that's not to say that you have to listen to us or that ours is the only way. But if you are going to follow this kind of methodology or the strategy that we talk about, kind of our wealth plan process, I just think it's really important that you follow the whole process. If you're going to, if you're going to renovate properties, for instance, and you're going to follow the cash flow hacking system, it's the same thing. Just make sure that you follow the cash flow hacking system. If you're going to flip properties or do a BRRRR system, just make sure you're following it the right way, because you don't want to kind of fall over on a couple of things and end up making the wrong decisions.
Yeah, and I think because jumping on TradeMe is so easy, it's only natural that we do that. We go on and we look around like we're going to buy a car. But remember, TradeMe is going to show you what's available, not necessarily what's good. And that's where good is subjective. So we want to actually break it down to what are the numbers you want to look at, and how do you weigh up what is a good investment versus a bad investment. I'll give you another example. I'm working with a couple at the moment, and they came in to see me and they said, "Hey, just so you're aware, we're looking at a property. It was around 900,000 in Christchurch." And I thought, okay, this is going to be quite a nice property. It's a townhouse, 900,000. And I thought, I don't know that this stacks up at all. In fact, I'd said no to these properties as a recommendation.
Were they 3 beds in Addington?
They were 3 bedrooms in Central City. And the whole reason that they were told that they were a good investment were that they were close to the stadium, which everyone's leaning on at the moment. Woohoo, that doesn't really make a difference because that announcement's already happened. And so as we know, once an infrastructure announcement has happened, the growth has already occurred, so you've missed out on it. And then the other part to it is, well, that could be a great Airbnb. Well, yeah, I would never assess a property based on its viability as an Airbnb, because that might come or go in the future. You don't know. You have no control over that. You have to look at it as fundamentals. And then if you choose to Airbnb, Airbnb it. That's all well and good, but it has to stack up anyway. And I compared that to a more affordable property in Christchurch and a property in Auckland, and basically the two properties, one in Christchurch, one in Auckland, is about the same kind of input as the one property in Christchurch that he was already looking at, or that they were already looking at.
I suppose the main thing as well is that's not to say that you can't find good deals on TradeMe, right? Because there's over 30,000 properties currently available for sale on there. Like, there's bound to be some good investments on there. I suppose the main thing that I often say to investors is there's this, have you ever heard the story where there's this psychological bias where if I had a cup, let me find a cup, I've got a mug somewhere on the background.
Is this the IKEA effect?
Can't get it. Yes, it is the IKEA effect. Yeah. Sorry, I just crawling over this.
How are you going to go? Where are you going to go? Use the IKEA effect with a mug?
Well, here's the thing. I can't remember which university did this, but there was a great study where if I said to you, Andrew, pretend your face isn't on it, because obviously that's going to make you value this cup more.
And anyone would. Anyone with common sense would.
If I asked you, how much are you going to pay for this mug? What's this worth? You might say
$3.
Oh, really? Oh, that's good. Do you have $3 available?
We probably spent more than that making them.
And then what this university study did was then gave this cup to people and said, rightio, this is your cup now.
Yeah.
How much is it worth? And the students would say more than $3 in that case. And so my point here is that if you own something, or if you have found something, in this case a property listing on TradeMe, often you value it more than if somebody came and offered you like something that was legitimately better.
Yes.
Because you've gone through the work to find it, and you're the one who found it. Now you believe that it is better, there's this bias where you think it is more better than it would otherwise be. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
more
yeah,
better.
and I'll actually more better. Follow us for more English lessons, and I'll give you another example. So, one of my investors that I work with, who's a really, really smart guy. He is really leaning into investing now and doing a lot of research himself, because that's in his nature, right? And so I've been encouraging, hey, invest more in Auckland. He came across a property and emailed it to me and said, what do you think about this one to add to my portfolio? And I said, yeah, it looks pretty good. He said, it's cheap, isn't it? And I said, yes, it is cheap for the area and for the fact that it's in Auckland and for what it is. Anyway, I thought, actually, this is so cheap that I might actually get Sammy, who heads up our Auckland property team. So she went out to this development and had a look at it and said, right, let's research these and see whether or not we bring these on for other investors. Now, it is cheap. So I'm not saying it's a bad investment, but when she walked in, she looks over and she sees this what do they call this? Washing machine. Right in the middle of the kind of the living area, like between the kitchen and the living area. And she said, where's that going to go? Like, why is that not in the laundry? And the developer said, well, that is the laundry area. We've just, we don't have any space for it. That's where it's going. And look, there's certain things as an investor that you say, actually, that's a little unnecessary, or that's a compromise I'm willing to make because, it needs to stack up from a numbers perspective. But that's probably a step too far, because you're going to have people that are going to maybe come to rent that property, and they'll look at the properties like I did online and go, hey, that looks like a nice property and it's being advertised for a pretty cheap rent. Then they're going to turn up and that's going to really put them off. And then you think about, okay, when you go to sell that property in 20 years' time, you're probably still going to put off 80% of the market, is my best guess. And so that's not something that I'd be willing to compromise as an investor. So sometimes the cheapest deal is not the best deal either.
And so I suppose what we're trying to get across is investing is not just, here's a location we like, decide whether you want to do new builds or renovations, pick any property off TradeMe and then go for it. There's quite a few more steps that you want to go for. And I just want to emphasize again, if you're going to follow, no matter which strategy or system of investing you decide to follow, again, whether it's going to be cash flow hacking or new builds, the wealth plan process or BRRRR or whatever it happens to be, just make sure you're following it the right way, because you don't want to think that you're doing the right thing and then trip up and unfortunately it doesn't work out so well. And again, that's not to say that there aren't good deals to be had anywhere in the market. Of course, there will be some good properties on TradeMe, but it's just those times where sometimes investors email me and I'm really happy for them that they are investing, but I just want to make sure that you guys are making the best investment decision that you possibly could. Right, let's wrap it up there, but please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, because over the last 15 minutes, we've learned, some of the deals that Andrew and I shake our heads at, how to tell the difference between a bargain and a baddie investment, and what to do instead of scrolling through TradeMe, which is basically using Opus Plus, free tool for you guys to use so you can tell those differences. You can sign up for that and free. I'll link it down in the show notes and in the description. Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Steve McKnight.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
We're going to be back again tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics, and insights to help you get the most out of the New Zealand property market. Until next time.